The great silver shape came out of the rain over northern France just after 2 in the morning, flying far too low. Farmers near the town of Beauvais heard her engines straining in the dark, watched her nose tip down toward a wooded ridge, and then the whole horizon flared orange. In a matter of seconds, the largest aircraft Britain had ever built was a cage of white-hot girders burning on a French hillside. 48 of the 54 people aboard would never leave it. Among the dead lay the man whose ambition had put them all in the sky that night, Lord Thomson, His Majesty's Secretary of State for Air, who had promised the world he would be in India and back within a fortnight. This is the story of how Britain's imperial dream burned in a field near Beauvais. And the question that has haunted it ever since is a simple one. Why did they fly a ship they knew was not ready? To answer that, we have to leave France and go back to a windswept airfield in Bedfordshire. At Cardington, on the flat farmland north of London, Britain had decided to knit its empire together with airships. The plan was called the Imperial Airship Scheme, a chain of mooring masts stretching from England to Egypt to India to Canada and Australia, along which enormous rigid airships would carry mail, passengers, and prestige across the map that was painted red. The great ocean liners took the better part of a fortnight to reach India. The airship, its champions promised, would glide over deserts and seas in serene, unhurried luxury in a matter of days. 2 ships were ordered to prove the idea. One, the R100, was built privately by a team that included a young engineer named Neville Shute, later famous around the world as a novelist. The other, the R101, was built by the government itself at Cardington, and it was the R101 that was meant to be the masterpiece, the state's own flagship, the ship that would carry the empire's hopes. She was a colossus, nearly 780 feet of steel framework wrapped in fabric, held aloft by 16 great bags of hydrogen, a flammable gas the British used because it lifted more than the safer helium, which was scarce and hoarded by the Americans. Inside her hull, she carried a dining room, a lounge, sleeping cabins with real beds, promenades with windows to watch the world drift past, even a smoking room, carefully sealed against the hydrogen breathing all around it. She was a hotel that flew. But from the very beginning, the R101 was troubled. She was too heavy. Her useful lift, the weight of passengers and fuel she could actually carry, came out far below what her designers had promised. Her diesel engines were dependable but ponderous, built for endurance rather than speed, and the enormous gas bags inside her, the very things that held her up, rubbed and chafed against the metal framework as she flexed in flight, wearing thin and leaking away the gas that kept her airborne. The engineers at Cardington knew all of this, and so they did something drastic. They cut the ship in half. In the summer of 1930, the R101 was sliced open and an entire new bay was inserted into her middle, adding another giant gas bag to give her more lift. It was an astonishing thing to do to a machine that was supposed to be nearly complete, the equivalent of sawing an ocean liner apart to splice in a new section amidships. And still, after all of it, the gas bags leaked. Here the story turns from engineering to politics. Because behind the schedule stood one impatient, powerful man. Lord Thomson was not merely a minister overseeing a project. He was its evangelist. He had staked his name and his reputation on airships, and he wanted the R101 to carry him personally to India and back in triumph, in time for a great imperial conference in London that autumn, a gathering where a successful flight would be his crowning argument. There were whispers, too, that Thomson dreamed of becoming Viceroy of India, and that one spectacular voyage might seal it. So the date was fixed. The ship would leave for India in the first week of October, whatever else happened. When engineers cautioned that more trials were needed, that the rebuilt ship had never even been tested at full speed in bad weather, the reply came back that the flight must proceed. Thomson himself is remembered for insisting the airship was as safe as a house, except, he added, for the millionth chance. The paperwork tells its own uncomfortable story. The R101 received her certificate of airworthiness only in the final days before departure, after her rebuild, and without the full program of trials that genuine safety demanded. The certificate was, in plain terms, hurried through to satisfy a political calendar. On the evening of the 4th of October 1930, the R101 slipped away from her mooring mast at Cardington and turned south into worsening weather. At her helm was Flight Lieutenant Carmichael Irwin, a former Olympic distance runner turned airship captain, a careful man who understood his ship's weaknesses better than anyone. Aboard with him were 53 others, crew, officials, and Lord Thompson, who had brought so much luggage, including a heavy rolled Persian carpet for grand receptions in Delhi, that it added real weight to a ship that could scarcely lift what it already carried. The forecast was poor and darkening by the hour. Wind and driving rain lay across the channel in northern France. For a ship that was overweight, underpowered, and buoyed by leaking gas, it was exactly the wrong night to be aloft. And yet the deadline had made that decision long before the weather ever could. She crossed the French coast already low and losing height. In the darkness and the rain, her crew fought to hold her level. Water soaked into her vast fabric skin, adding tons of dead weight she could not afford. The hydrogen that held her up was quietly seeping away. She flew lower and lower, her nose dipping, recovering, dipping again, an enormous waterlogged creature wallowing through the storm at little more than rooftop height. Just after 2 in the morning, on the low wooded hill of Beauvais, she came down. She struck the earth slowly, almost softly, but she was a vast structure filled with hydrogen, and the instant her framework buckled, the escaping gas found a spark. The fire was immediate and total. People miles away said the sky itself seemed to catch light. Men asleep in their cabins never woke. Of the 54 aboard, 48 died, most of them consumed by the flames rather than killed by the impact. Lord Thompson died with them. The Dream and the Dreamer perished in the same fire. Only a small handful survived, mostly engineers working in the afterpart of the ship near the tail, who were thrown clear or scrambled out through the wreckage into the rain. They lived to describe the last minutes of a ship that so many had insisted was safe. When the news reached England, the country was stunned into silence. The dead were carried home across the Channel, and hundreds of thousands lined the streets of London and stood bareheaded at Cardington as the coffins passed. It was a national mourning on the scale of a lost battle. Then came the reckoning. A formal inquiry was convened under Sir John Simon to establish exactly what had gone wrong. Its conclusions, when they came, were quietly devastating. The R101 had been sent on a long and punishing flight before she was fit for it. The rebuild, the leaking gas bags, the trials that were skipped, the certificate granted in haste, the refusal to wait for better weather, all of it led back to a schedule driven not by engineering judgment, but by the determination to reach India on time. The technical failings were real enough, but behind every one of them stood the pressure of a deadline that had been allowed to matter more than the lives of the men who flew. And here lies the cruelest irony of all. Across the North Sea, the Germans had been doing the very same thing, differently. Their great airship, the Graf Zeppelin, was already crossing oceans and had circled the entire globe, patiently and safely, and it would go on flying for years to come. The German crews were careful where the British had been rushed. The age of the airship was not, in that autumn of 1930, over at all. It was thriving, simply under another flag. But for Britain, Beauvais was the end. The government's nerve failed completely. The R101's sister ship, the R100, the one that had actually flown across the Atlantic to Canada and safely home again, never flew again. She was grounded, her gas let out, her frame crushed and sold for scrap at a few pence a pound. The mooring masts strung out toward India were abandoned. The Imperial airship scheme, the grand vision of binding an empire together through the sky, was simply cancelled. Britain would never build another rigid airship. The enormous shed at Cardington still stands today, cavernous and empty against the Bedfordshire sky. In a quiet churchyard nearby, the 48 lie together beneath a single stone. They died in the end, not because the airship was an impossible idea. The Germans had proved that it was not, but because a great and impatient nation ordered a flawed machine to keep a political appointment and would not hear the word wait. The R101 was meant to show that Britain could master the air as it had mastered the sea. Instead, she proved something far smaller and far crueler. That no imperial dream, however vast, is worth the weight of a single Persian carpet on a ship already too heavy to fly. Beauvais took the ship, the men, and Britain's nerve all in a single fire. Would the airship age have survived if Britain had simply waited? Watch the next story on screen now.